A desperate German shepherd, abandoned and injured on the side of the road, locks eyes with a stranger, and everything changes. His fight to survive will break your heart and restore your faith in second chances. You won't believe how his story ends. The rain came down in heavy sheets, turning the narrow country road into a slick, glistening ribbon. Samantha tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her headlights barely cutting through the storm. She was exhausted after a long shift at the clinic, but something made her slow down, her instincts prickling. That's when she saw him. At first, he looked like nothing more than a dark, crumpled shadow by the roadside. But as her car crawled closer, Samantha's heart clenched. It was a dog, a German shepherd, soaked to the bone, lying motionless in the mud. His ribs jutted out against his skin, his coat matted with filth and blood. Without thinking, she pulled over, hazard lights flashing. Grabbing the emergency kit from the back seat, Samantha sprinted into the rain. "Hey, buddy," she called softly, dropping to her knees beside him. He didn't move. Only his shallow, ragged breathing told her he was alive. Her hands trembled as she gently checked for injuries. Cuts, bruises, no obvious broken bones, but he was badly dehydrated and hypothermic. He needed help. Fast. "You're okay now," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I've got you." It took everything she had to lift his limp body into the back seat. He didn't fight, didn't even flinch, just gave a soft whimper that shattered her heart. The drive back to the clinic felt endless. Samantha kept glancing at the rearview mirror, murmuring reassurances, hoping he could hear her. "Stay with me, buddy. We're almost there." When they finally arrived, she burst through the doors, shouting for Derek, the night tech. "What the hell?" Derek started, but froze when he saw the dog. His expression hardened. "Get him on the table, now." They worked together in a frantic, well-practiced rhythm. IV fluids, warming blankets, antibiotics, pain meds. Samantha never once left his side, her hand resting lightly against his bony shoulder. "Is he gonna make it?" Derek asked quietly as they monitored his vitals. Samantha swallowed hard. "I don't know, but he's a fighter." For hours they battled against the odds. The storm raged on outside, but inside the clinic a different kind of battle was being fought, a battle for a life that had almost been forgotten. When morning finally came, the shepherd was still alive, but just barely. He hadn't stirred once. Samantha pulled a chair next to his table and sat down heavily, exhaustion weighing her down. She studied his face. So handsome under all that grime, so heartbreakingly vulnerable. Who had left him like this? Who had looked into those intelligent eyes and decided he wasn't worth saving? "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise." Days passed in a grueling routine. Samantha spent every spare moment by his side, feeding him small amounts of broth, cleaning his wounds, massaging his stiff limbs to keep them from locking up. Every tiny change she celebrated like a miracle. A flick of his ear, a slight twitch of his tail, a faint sigh when she stroked his fur. "You hear me, don't you?" she murmured one evening, brushing his ears gently. "You know you're not alone anymore." Derek watched her sometimes, a bemused expression on his face. "You're talking to a dog that can't even lift his head," he teased. Samantha didn't even look up. "Doesn't matter. He hears me. I know he does." One night, after a particularly long shift, she sat beside him, her head resting on the edge of the table. The shepherd stirred for the first time, his nose twitching weakly toward her hand. Samantha's eyes flew open. She barely dared to breathe. Slowly, tenderly, she slid her fingers along his jaw. His skin quivered under her touch. "There you are," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Come back to me." It was the beginning of something miraculous. The next morning, when Derek walked in with 2 coffees in hand, he froze. The shepherd, frail, battered, but alive, was struggling to lift his head. "I'll be damned," Derek muttered, handing Samantha a coffee. She smiled through her tears, feeling hope bloom in her chest. "He's not giving up. Neither are we." From that moment, progress came in tiny, beautiful victories. A slow blink, a paw stretching out tentatively, a soft whine when Samantha left the room. He was telling them, in his own broken way, that he wanted to live. Samantha spent hours every day coaxing him, encouraging him. She named him Chance because that's exactly what he had been given, a second chance at life. And slowly, surely, Chance began to heal. By the second week, he could sit up with help. Samantha helped support his weight, her voice gentle and constant. "Good boy, Chance. You're doing so good." His trust in her grew stronger each day. If she stepped out of the room, he would lift his head, searching for her. When she returned, his tail would give the faintest wag. Each day was still a battle. His muscles were weak, his appetite finicky. But he was fighting. And Samantha was right there with him, every step of the way. The world outside the clinic went on. Storms came and went, leaves changed from green to gold. But inside those walls, a small miracle was taking place. Chance wasn't just surviving. He was learning how to live again. The first time Chance stood on his own, it was anything but graceful. His legs wobbled dangerously, his body shook from the effort, but Samantha was right there, her arms half outstretched in case he fell. "You can do it, buddy," she whispered, her heart hammering in her chest. Chance looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes, then took a single, trembling step. The room erupted in cheers. Even Derek clapped from across the counter, grinning. "That's it, Chance," Samantha laughed, wiping tears from her face. "You're walking." It was a shaky, uneven journey across the linoleum floor, but to Samantha it felt like watching someone climb a mountain. Each step was an act of defiance against the past that had tried to destroy him. Word about the miracle dog spread quickly through the small town. People started dropping off donations, bags of dog food, soft blankets, squeaky toys. A local bakery sent a box of homemade dog treats, tied with a ribbon. A little boy named Liam came in with his mother, clutching a hand-drawn picture of Chance with a big red heart. Samantha pinned it up on the bulletin board where everyone could see it. "This dog's touched everyone," Derek said one evening, watching as Samantha carefully spoon-fed Chance his dinner. "He's special," she said simply. "He's a survivor." But despite his growing strength, there were still mysteries about Chance that haunted Samantha. Where had he come from? Why had no one come looking for him? One night, as she sat with him after hours, she noticed an old, faded scar around his neck. Thin, almost hidden beneath his fur. It wasn't from an accident. It was from a chain. A heavy one. Samantha's stomach twisted. "You poor baby," she whispered, stroking his ear. "You've seen more cruelty than any soul should." And yet, despite everything, Chance still leaned into her touch, still trusted her. Samantha made a decision that night. She wasn't going to let his past define him. She wasn't going to let him be just another sad story. He deserved a future. A real one. The next morning, she started the paperwork to officially adopt him. "You're sure about this?" Derek asked, handing her the forms. "Never been more sure about anything," Samantha said, signing her name with a firm, decisive stroke. Chance was coming home. The first few days at Samantha's house were overwhelming for him. He stood frozen in the living room, his eyes darting around nervously at the unfamiliar space. Samantha gave him all the time he needed, sitting cross-legged on the floor, tossing treats gently his way. "It's okay, Chance," she murmured. This is your home now. No more cages? No more fear? Little by little, he explored. First the living room, then the kitchen, his nose working overtime to take in the new smells. He found a cozy spot by the fireplace where Samantha had placed a thick, soft dog bed. When he finally curled up there and sighed, a deep, contented sigh, Samantha knew he understood. That night, she woke to find him lying beside her bed, his head resting on the mattress, his eyes closed in peaceful sleep. "You're safe," she whispered into the darkness, her heart full. "You're home." The days turned into weeks, and Chance blossomed in ways Samantha hadn't dared to dream. He gained weight steadily, his coat growing glossy and full. His muscles filled out, his gait became confident and strong. But more than that, his spirit healed. He played with his toys, chasing squeaky balls across the backyard, his ears flopping wildly. He greeted Samantha at the door every evening with joyful barks and a wagging tail. He even made friends with the neighbor's golden retriever, Daisy, and they spent long afternoons romping together under the sun. But despite all the joy, there were still moments when his old fears crept back. Sometimes a loud noise, like a car backfiring, would send him trembling into Samantha's arms. Sometimes, if a stranger reached for him too quickly, he'd flinch, his eyes wide with panic. Samantha never forced him. She simply knelt beside him, her voice calm and steady, letting him know he was safe. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, complicated. But it was happening. One Sunday afternoon, Samantha decided to take Chance to the local park. It was a big step, one she wasn't sure he was ready for, but something in her gut told her it was time. She clipped on his leash, packed a bag with water and treats, and loaded him into the car. Chance sat quietly in the back seat, his head tilted curiously at the new adventure. When they arrived, Samantha opened the car door and crouched beside him. "You ready, buddy?" she asked. Chance sniffed the air, his ears perking up at the sense of grass, picnics, and distant laughter. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped out onto the grass. At first, he stuck close to Samantha's side, his body tense. But as they walked, he relaxed, his tail giving tentative wags. Children ran past, laughing and shouting, and Chance flinched. But when Samantha knelt and whispered reassurances, he stayed. An elderly man sitting on a bench smiled and offered Chance a piece of his sandwich. Chance hesitated for a long moment before inching forward and gently taking it from his hand. Samantha's chest swelled with pride. "You're so brave," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "You're amazing." As they sat in the sun, Chance resting his head on her lap, Samantha realized something profound. Chance wasn't the only one who had been saved. In saving him, she had found a piece of herself she hadn't even realized was missing. A quiet, fierce hope that even the most broken hearts could heal. Together, they were rewriting their story. And it was just the beginning. The next few weeks brought even more milestones for Chance. Samantha enrolled him in a gentle, trust-based obedience class at a small training center on the edge of town. At first, Chance clung to her side like a shadow, his body stiff with uncertainty. New smells, new dogs, new people. It was a lot. But Samantha stayed calm and patient, never forcing him. The instructor, a kind woman named Marla, knelt down and let Chance approach her at his own pace. "He's been through something, hasn't he?" Marla asked, her voice low and understanding. Samantha nodded. "We're just taking it one step at a time." And step by step, Chance grew. He learned basic commands like sit, stay, and come, but more importantly, he learned that new experiences didn't have to be terrifying. He earned treats and praise. his confidence blossoming a little more with every success. By the end of the 6-week course, he was walking into the training center with his tail wagging, eager to work. One evening after class, as Samantha was gathering their things, Marla approached her. "You ever think about getting him certified as a therapy dog?" she asked casually. Samantha blinked. "Therapy dog? I mean, he's come so far, but—" Marla smiled warmly. "He has the heart for it, I can see it. And sometimes the dogs who've been through the worst make the best healers." The idea lodged itself in Samantha's mind and refused to leave. Could Chance really become a therapy dog? Could the same dog who had once cowered at every noise now bring comfort to others? The thought filled her with a fierce hope. At home that night, she sat on the floor with Chance, scratching behind his ears. "What do you think, buddy?" she murmured. "Think you're ready to change a few more lives?" Chance responded by licking her face enthusiastically, making her laugh out loud. "Okay," she said, wiping her cheek. "Let's do it." The months that followed were filled with intense training, evaluations, and countless hours of practice. Chance learned to walk calmly through crowded spaces, to ignore sudden noises, to approach strangers gently. Samantha marveled at his determination, at the quiet dignity with which he faced every challenge. He had bad days, of course, days when the old fears crept in, and he needed extra reassurance. But overall, he was becoming someone new, someone brave, someone kind. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of work, the day of the final certification test arrived. Samantha was a bundle of nerves as they entered the testing facility, her hands trembling slightly on the leash. "You've got this," she whispered to Chance. "We've got this." And he did. Chance aced the exam with flying colors, impressing the evaluators with his calm demeanor and gentle heart. When they handed Samantha his official therapy dog certificate, she nearly burst into tears. "You did it, Chance," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "You did it." Their first assignment was at a local nursing home, a quiet, sun-filled place where many of the residents didn't have family nearby. Samantha was nervous as they walked through the front doors. But Chance was different. He walked beside her with his head held high, his body relaxed. He seemed to know he had a purpose here. The first person they visited was an elderly woman named Mrs. Green, who sat by the window staring out at nothing. Chance approached her slowly, sitting down at her feet and resting his head gently on her knee. For a long moment, Mrs. Green didn't move. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached down and stroked his fur. Tears welled in her cloudy eyes. "My husband. He had a shepherd once," she whispered, "just like you." Chance stayed perfectly still, offering silent comfort, his eyes soft and kind. Samantha watched, her throat tight with emotion. This was why they had fought so hard. This was why they hadn't given up. Week after week, Chance continued his visits, bringing joy and healing wherever he went. At the children's hospital, he would lie patiently as little hands patted his head and draped him in colorful blankets. At the community center, he sat quietly while veterans with haunted eyes found solace in his steady presence. Everywhere he went, he left a trail of smiles behind him. But one visit changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Samantha got a call from the coordinator at the nursing home. "Can you come in today?" the woman asked. "We have someone who could really use Chance." Of course, Samantha said yes. When they arrived, the atmosphere felt different, heavy, sad. The nurses spoke in hushed tones. They led Samantha and Chance to a private room at the end of the hall. Inside, a young man sat hunched in a wheelchair, staring blankly at the floor. His name was Jake. He had been in a terrible accident and had lost the will to speak, to engage, to live. The nurses hoped Chance might reach him in a way no one else could. Samantha's heart ached at the sight of him, but she pushed her own feelings aside. This was about Jake now. She gave Chance a gentle pat and nodded. "Go ahead, buddy," she whispered. Chance approached slowly, his steps soft. He sat down right in front of Jake, his head tilted slightly, as if waiting. Minutes passed. Jake didn't move, didn't blink. Then, almost imperceptibly, his fingers twitched. Chance leaned in closer, nudging Jake's hand with his nose. Jake's fingers moved again, this time deliberately, curling into Chance's thick fur. A tear slipped down Samantha's cheek. Jake lifted his head just a little and looked at Chance for the first time. It wasn't a miracle cure. It wasn't dramatic. It was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were everything. From that day on, Chance and Jake built something fragile and beautiful. It started with tiny moments, Jake brushing Chance's fur with trembling hands, Jake letting out a hoarse laugh when Chance clumsily dropped a tennis ball in his lap. Moments that grew into minutes, minutes into hours. Samantha kept bringing Chance week after week, watching with quiet pride as Jake came back to life piece by piece. His physical therapy sessions improved. He started speaking again, at first just a few words, then full sentences. All because a German shepherd had refused to give up on him. Word of Chance's impact began to spread. Other facilities started calling, asking if he could visit. Hospitals, schools, even a shelter for at-risk teens. Everywhere he went, Chance carried the same quiet magic, the ability to see past scars and brokenness straight into the heart. And somehow, in healing others, Chance healed himself too. There was a lightness about him now, a joy that hadn't been there before. Samantha noticed it when they went for walks, when he trotted beside her with his head high and tail wagging. One chilly evening, they walked down the same road where Samantha had first found him. The leaves skittered across the pavement, the wind cold against her face. She paused, looking at the spot where it all began. Chance stopped too, his gaze steady, almost as if he remembered. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Chance leaned into her, pressing his weight against her chest. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "You saved me too, you know," she murmured. "I thought I was rescuing you, but you rescued me right back." They stood there for a long moment, just the two of them and the wide, open world. That night, Samantha sat by the fire, a cup of tea in her hands, Chance curled up at her feet. She opened her laptop and started a blog titled Chance Encounters. In it, she shared their story, the roadside rescue, the slow journey of trust and healing, the miracles Chance had brought to so many lives. She didn't expect much. Maybe a few people would read it. Maybe it would just be a way to process everything they'd been through. But within a week, the blog went viral. People all over the world read about Chance and Jake, about the nursing home residents, the children in the hospital, the veterans finding hope again. The comments poured in. "I cried reading this. Thank you for sharing. Your story gave me hope on a very dark day." Chance is proof that there's still goodness in this world. News outlets started calling. Local reporters wanted to do interviews. Animal welfare organizations reached out, offering grants to help with therapy dog outreach programs. It was overwhelming, but also beautiful. Samantha made sure to keep it grounded. She and Chance kept visiting their regular spots, staying connected to the people who had become their second family. One afternoon, they visited Jake again. This time, Jake wasn't slumped in a wheelchair. He was standing, wobbly, braced against parallel bars, but standing. Tears filled Samantha's eyes as she watched him shuffle a few steps forward, Chance walking patiently beside him. Jake grinned, a real, bright grin, and ruffled Chance's ears. "You did this, buddy," he said hoarsely. "You brought me back." Samantha swallowed hard, trying to speak past the lump in her throat. "You both brought each other back," she said finally. That evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors, Samantha sat on her porch, Chance's head resting in her lap. A thought crept into her mind, wild and impossible. Maybe they could do even more. Maybe they could start something bigger, a foundation, a rescue focused on saving dogs like Chance, training them to become therapy animals for people who needed them most. Dogs who had been thrown away, abandoned, broken, transforming into healers. She scribbled ideas into a notebook, her mind racing with possibilities. Chance lifted his head and looked at her, tail thumping gently. "You're not done yet, are you?" she whispered, smiling. "We're just getting started." The first steps were small, setting up a non-profit organization, reaching out to contacts, finding a few like-minded volunteers. But soon, everything began to grow. They called it Chance for Hope. The mission was simple: rescue, rehabilitate, and redeploy. Every dog that came into their program was given a second chance, and every human they touched found a spark of hope. Within a year, Chance for Hope had rescued over 50 dogs. 30 of them had completed therapy training and were now working in hospitals, senior centers, and schools across the state. Samantha often stood back at events, watching with a full heart as dogs and people found each other, healing old wounds together. Chance, of course, remained the heart of it all. At every fundraiser, every graduation ceremony, he was there. Calm, wise, steady. People gravitated toward him like a beacon. One autumn evening, as golden leaves drifted through the air, Samantha sat beside a campfire at a Chance for Hope gathering. Families, volunteers, therapy dogs, all surrounded her, laughter and stories filling the night. Chance sat at her feet, surveying the scene like a king surveying his kingdom. Samantha leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "Look at what you started," she whispered. He gave a soft chuff, his tail thumping once. Somewhere deep in the woods, a lone coyote sang to the stars. Samantha smiled, knowing they had answered a call greater than themselves. And it had all started with a broken dog on the side of a lonely road, and a woman who decided not to look away. The clinic was quiet when Jenna arrived early that morning, the sky still draped in pale gray. Aiden's kennel was the first place she went. As soon as he heard her footsteps, his head popped up, ears perked, eyes bright. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, unlocking the door. He trotted out eagerly, moving much easier now. His gait was still stiff, but there was life in his steps, determination in every movement. The past weeks had been nothing short of a miracle. From the desperate, broken dog on the side of the road to this strong, resilient soul now wagging his tail at her, it felt almost unreal. Jenna crouched down, running her fingers through his thick, coarse fur. "You're almost ready," she said softly. Aiden leaned into her touch, letting out a soft, contented huff. The paperwork had already been filed. Jenna wasn't just going to patch him up and send him away. She had decided. She was adopting him. When she told Dr. Patel, he just smiled. "Not surprised," he said. "Some dogs pick their people. He picked you the moment you stopped on that road." The adoption day arrived under a golden afternoon sun. Jenna stood outside the clinic, leash in hand, while Aiden sniffed the grass, his nose twitching, tail giving soft, slow wags. He looked healthier now, The patches in his fur had filled in, his body had regained strength, but his spirit, that fierce, loyal spirit, had never wavered. She knelt and called, "Come on, Aiden." Without hesitation, he bounded over, pressing his forehead against her chest. Tears stung Jenna's eyes. She hugged him tightly, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her. "You're safe now," she whispered into his fur. "You're home." Driving back to her house, Aiden sat proudly in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears flapping in the breeze. Every now and then, he'd glance back at her as if to check, "Is this real? Am I really going home?" When they pulled into the driveway, Jenna opened the door and barely had time to grab the leash before Aiden was out, exploring the yard, tail wagging. He chased a few leaves, barked joyfully at a bird, then ran back to her, tongue lolling happily out of his mouth. Watching him, Jenna realized something. Saving him hadn't just saved his life. It had changed hers, too. In his resilience, she found strength. In his loyalty, she found healing. And in his simple, stubborn will to survive, she found hope. That night, Aiden curled up on the couch beside her, resting his head in her lap. Jenna stroked his fur as they sat in silence, the soft hum of a new beginning settling around them. "You were never broken," she whispered. "You just needed someone to see you." Aiden let out a soft sigh, his eyes fluttering closed. For the first time in a long time, both of them were exactly where they belonged. Together. Home.